Everyone. Gerald Butts was tweeting today, and who's Gerald Butts? Gerald Butts is the unelected aide to the Prime Minister, one of his closest aides. He was also an aide to Kathleen Wynne. I was going to go through his history. Look it up. He has a toe in, more than a toe in, the green energy revolution. And if you know what a scam that turned out to be, well, that's who's in our Prime Minister's ear. So that is what it is, and he believes in his work. So that is what it is. And his question that he's tweeting out is, honest question: why were the many millions of public dollars that used to be spent on government advertising in newspapers okay, but this transparent policy change is deplorable? So I'll go back and let's see what he's talking about, because I want to be really clear about all this. So this is the Liberal Party tweet, and that's not the one he's responding to, but we'll get there. This one is in response to this one, so we'll get there. So the Liberal Party tweeted out, public funding and tax support for free and independent news media is the norm, not the exception, in Western democracies around the world. Our new plan will help journalists of any stripe thrive in this country. And here's the image that they're displaying with it. It's a strong media, strong democracy, public help for journalism around the world. And then it's got all these flags, and Canada's as well. And it says arm's length support. Have you heard that before? If you go check out my other video on the spending, the $600 million they're handing it to the media over the next 5 years, go have a look at that and see how many times they say arm's length. You could don't do a drinking game. Drinking is poison. It's a bad idea. Do a token game or something other than drinking, because drinking is not a good idea. But how many times arm's length comes up, right? If you were to do a drinking game, you would get very drunk very quickly, because arm's length comes up a lot. They're trying to paint this, they're trying to brand this already. They know this is a problem. They know this is a problem because they're getting pushback on it. They're making tweets like this because they're getting pushback on it. Everybody else is doing it. Look, public help for journalism all around the world, right? Oh, everybody, yes. It's done. Everybody else is doing it, so why can't we do it? Let's all jump off the cliff together, right? No. So the tweet that Mr. Gerald Butts or Butts, I'm not sure how to say his name, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I really just don't know how to say his name. So Gerald Butts was responding to was Ken Whyte's, this initiative is deplorable. It will undermine the credibility of all Canadian news media by its very existence. Since it is unlikely to go away, here's one fix to make it less reprehensible. And then he goes on a little thread about it. I'm not getting into that. That's not what I wanted to get into. But Gerald decided that he wants to know, why were the many millions of public dollars that used to be spent on government advertising and newspapers okay, but this transparent policy change is deplorable? Well, I'll tell you, Gerald, I've got to wonder a couple of questions myself before we get into how much the government spends on advertising. And the first question is, are you saying that the $600 million that you're spending to bail out the media because they're failing is exactly the same as the spending that's been happening for years as government advertising? Is that the same spending? And is the media, fundamentally, is the media bailout and spending on advertising just all in the same pocket? All in the same, bank account, all in the same stack of chips? Like the government has a bunch of different stacks of chips. This is to be spent on immigration. This is to be spent on police forces. This is to be spent on, all these different budgets, right? Is this fund coming all out of the same fund? Where did that fund come from before? How was it allocated before? And how much was it? Because I didn't know. And I don't think there's a limit on it, actually, because I'll show you from 2005 to now how much they spend on advertising every year. How much we spend on advertising every year. And is spending on advertising going to end now that you're giving the media $600 million? Is it's roughly, well, now it's like $70 million a year. So is that $70 million just going to be rolled into this, or is that on top of the bailout that you're giving them? And why do you think that the Canadian public thinks the many millions of dollars that were spent on advertising was okay? Because I'll tell you, one of my biggest complaints when I was driving around in cars regularly and listening to the radio, I switched over to podcasts because I can't stand the radio. But one of my biggest complaints was hearing the government advertising. I thought, how much money are they spending on this garbage? If I want to know, I'm gonna go online and find out. And the fact is, if you're advertising it, generally it seems like a distraction. The marijuana advertising, it's just awful. Awful. So those are my questions for you there, Gerald. Is the advertising budget going to shrink or stop? And has it already been? I guess you've been bailing the media out for years, I suppose. And yeah. So here is, I tracked things down. This is 2018's 2018-19 budget, and they've spent $14 million this year. And you can see each line item. So Parks Canada gets some, Employment and Social Development Canada gets some. And it's very, very, very detailed notes about what campaigns they are, right? So, and I run an advertising budget, and I understand just how much money this is. So this isn't a small amount of advertising budget, right? So pretty incredible how much they're spending. But I thought, well, how much are they spending historically? How much are they spending? How much did they spend last year? And so on. So this is the Government of Canada website, and the link will be in the description. Have a look for yourself. This is allocations from the Central Fund and advertising fund allocations. And this is the archive page. So in January 1st to March 31st, 2018, they spent $25 million. And add that to the $14 million. So they're not quite at the $17 million that they usually spend. But was this quarter 4? This is quarter 1. So yeah, we don't have quarter 4. So they've got some room to spend money in the last quarter. So I'm sure we'll see those calculations, and it'll bring it up to about 70 unless they've increased. But here is 2016. And 2016's first quarter is 22 million, well, 23 million effectively. And it's not all, oh, okay, so there's the fourth quarter. And so I guess in 2017, or 2016, my apologies, they spent about 23 million. 2015, they spent 56 million. 2014, they spent almost 5 million, 4.5 million, plus 60 million, 400,000. So 64 million across the whole year. 2013, they spent 57, about 64, 65 maybe. Oops. So you see in the point, they're spending about $70 million a year. There you go, $70 million. And you can see each, citizenship guide for advertising, $520 million for advertising about the citizenship guide. Great. Combating immigration fraud, $1 million. Yay. So this money, and I went all the way back to 2004 just because I was interested. So 13 million plus 38 million. So it's been roughly, $50 million for advertising for a long, long time. When did we agree to this? Should we have a policy that says, advertising is okay for X, or should they just put it up on the government website and have a policy during elections saying, hey, here's our YouTube channel. I think that election campaigns should have a max spend of $10,000, and they get a YouTube channel and a web page, and that's it. That's all you get. You get no ad time, you get no air time, you get nothing. If you want people to come to see your website, then you need to have a following and etc. And I understand how advertising works, but at this point in time, it's just being weaponized against people. I also wondered what the purpose of a public broadcast is. Is it to subsidize news? Because that's what Gerald is saying here. He says, honest question, why are the many millions of dollars that used to be spent on advertising in newspapers okay, but this transparent policy change is deplorable? Well, because they're going to have an arm's length panel that decides who gets the money there, Gerald. That's why you get a panel that decides who gets the money. But I guess that's better than just, somebody in accounting deciding that, oh, we're not going to spend advertising funds on rebel media. Can't do that. So what good is the public broadcaster? Because he's saying that the public broadcaster should be broadcasting news, and that lots of Western governments pay for news to be broadcast by their public broadcaster. And that is not entirely true. So this is a report prepared by Nordicacy. I don't know how to say the name, and I'm sorry. They are I can't remember the term. Hold on. A consulting firm. It came to me as soon as I hit pause. A consulting firm that does these kind of reports. I don't like this report. This report is not arbitrary. They assigned points to all sorts of public broadcasters and said who would benefit most from a public broadcaster, and Canada benefited most. Of course, Canada benefited most. So it's a little bit influenced by their opinion, too influenced by their opinion, in my opinion. But they go through what a public broadcaster's goal is, and I thought it was pretty good. So I'm going to read it out, just so we all understand what a public broadcaster should be doing. And I don't think it's necessarily news. Okay. Most goods are supplied through competitive markets with little risk of market failure. However, certain goods and services or certain market conditions are more prone to market failure, thereby necessitating some type of government intervention. Broadcasting services and public broadcasting services in particular represent one such good. In general, broadcasting services display characteristics of what economists call public goods. Unlike most goods, public goods are non-rival and non-excludable. The non-rival nature means that one person's consumption does not exclude another's consumption. Their non-excludability means that they can be easily shared among consumers or citizens. National defense is an example. Public goods are often undersupplied by market because producers may be unable to privately capture the economic value that society places on such goods. Historically, the broadcasting industry has responded to the public good nature of its product by, quote, giving it away for free to consumers, free-to-air broadcasting, and instead selling advertising airtime to businesses. These advertising businesses, however, have sought to maximize the exposure of their ads. This created incentives for broadcasters to create or commission general audience programming that appealed to the majority of viewers. As a result, many genres of programming that appealed to a minority of viewers, minority audience programming, such as documentaries, indigenous programming, high-quality drama, amateur sports, or children's programming, were undersupplied. Okay, so what they're saying is a public broadcaster can fill in the gaps of the undersupplied things that the market doesn't fill the gaps in, right? Like if there's no parents willing to pay for good children's programming, which we know now is not the case. We've got Netflix, we've got all sorts of options. But way back in the 80s or 70s even, people didn't have that option, so they needed to create an incentive or just pay for it out of taxpayer money. Now, and a lot of times in the UK and in a lot of other countries, there's a direct licensing fee. You have to pay your monthly television license fee, and it's like $5 a month or £5 a month or whatever it is. And that money goes directly to the BBC. And so Butts is conflating paying for news and supporting a public broadcaster with public money. And I don't think the two are the same thing. I think they're fundamentally different. And I think that it's weird that one of the highest placed aides to our prime minister is confused about this, has an honest question about this, because really it doesn't take much digging to look at what is the role of a public broadcaster, and that's to fill in the gaps. And the Toronto Star, the CBC, which is already publicly funded and has a budget of I think it's $1 billion a year, and that's only 1/3 of its budget because it's also allowed to sell advertising. That's all listed in this report here if you're interested. So there's already a public broadcaster that already has public funds and private funds. So in what way does bailing out other news organizations that are failing because they don't make money, because people do not subscribe to them, because their product is trash, is literally propaganda nonsense that people are not interested in reading? And the same with the CBC, Mr. Butts. The same with the CBC. Most people would be quite happy to cut the CBC's budget completely, zero, and let it fail, myself included. So it's interesting that you're trying to conflate the news being funded by this new transparent policy change and public broadcasting funding, because the two are fundamentally different. And it's interesting that you're saying, wait, why was it okay if we were spending money on advertising, but now that we're just paying directly for private companies to put out bad product, but make sure it's product that we believe in and we find trustworthy, we being the Liberal government, that's okay? Why is that okay? Why do you think that that's okay? I think that your position is your position on this news thing and your position on that confusing people with this doublespeak, blatant doublespeak, is Just terrible. You should know better, sir. So that's my 2 cents for today. And all of the links are in the description. Thanks for watching. I hope that Mr. Butts is unemployed as of October 22nd, 2019. That's what I hope for. My fingers are crossed. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful Sunday.